All right, I'm with Doug Dozark from Cycle Brewery in downtown St. Petersburg. The unique thing about Cycle Brewery is their barrel age program. They have been barrel aging beers for quite a bit, and go ahead and explain a little bit about the barrel age process. Where do you get these barrels from, and what's the process of transferring the beer and all that stuff? Basically, where do you get these barrels from?
The barrels almost all come from bourbon distilleries. Bourbon barrels used for bourbon have to be fresh oak for bourbon, and then after that they can't use them for bourbon anymore. So there's a lot of surplus bourbon barrels out there. They normally would be, and historically have gone to Scotland for Scotch. You can age other spirits in them, but right now there's been a real push to get them into the craft brewers' hands. They've gone to almost exclusively working through barrel brokers. You can't really get anybody at the distillery to take your call, even if you want.
Give directly from the brewer.
No,
the distillery. Okay.
and even beyond that, they've gone to the point where the brokers are often not allowed to even tell you what distillery they came from. They become very protective of, I'm not sure what.
So basically, a lot of craft brewers are going after these barrels and aging their beer in there, so there's a huge demand for these, so the prices of these have definitely increased.
Yeah, from 2009 when I worked at Cigar City to now, they were pretty much standard $75 for a 53-gallon bourbon barrel, and now it's minimum 150, and that's buying a lot at a time to get a discount. Up to most we paid is $220. I've seen them listed higher.
Wow. So what you're trying to do is, when you order these barrels, is get them as fresh as possible from the brewery or from the distillery. You want them to actually have a little bit of product left in them. Mm-hmm. You don't want them dried out or anything like that.
Yep.
So as and you're saying rum is what you exclusively use?
Bourbon.
I'm sorry, bourbon.
Yeah, we have used rum. The rum barrels we use the only rum barrels we use are from Pritchard's, which is in Lincoln County, Kelso, Tennessee. It's a very small distillery, and he makes bourbon as well in the heart of bourbon country, but he decided, you know what, I want to make rum. And the rum that he makes, he basically treats it like bourbon, so he gets fresh barrels, puts rum in it, uses it once, and then we get those barrels. And those are really special barrels. Nobody does rum like that. Most of the rum in the Caribbean is used until there's nothing left of those barrels.
Right.
But those are very limited and very hard to get and very expensive. So those are, as far as rum,
$250 or $300 or even more.
No, they're like $140 for a 15-gallon barrel.
Ooh,
so your cost is more like $500 for the same volume of barrel-aged beer in barrel cost.
Right.
So,
and an average barrel is 55 gallons?
53, which that size came from. It was the biggest vessel they could fit on their racks.
Wow.
So it is not based like on some king deciding that's what a barrel is. It's just as big as they could fit on their racks.
Okay, that makes sense. So once you get the barrel and you transfer your beer into there, how many times do you use that barrel?
We get the barrels generally, we hope, within a week of them being dumped. Again, barrel brokers, they'll tell you what you want to hear. You hope it's true. We have a few that have really been pretty consistent, and then throwing the beer in there takes we'll get in a bunch of barrels. We'll fill them within 2 to 3 months. We leave the beer in that barrel until it's done, which can take a variety of times.
And that leads to the fact that you age beer for a year.
Mm-hmm.
You take a stout that's generally higher in alcohol, over 10%.
Yep.
And you age it in a barrel for a year. And how often do you check it? I mean, would you use a wine thief, they call it?
We used to use a wine thief. Now we drill a hole into the barrel. We took a few tips from the distilling industry. They have some nicer things to where the liquid in the barrel you could use as a disinfectant. So
Wow.
you can't infect what they have in the barrel. We have to be a lot more cautious.
Okay.
But yeah, they'll just take a drill a big old hole in there with the barrel on its side. Liquid just starts flowing out of there. They grab some in a cup and jam a plug back in. It's like, oh, that's how you try a barrel.
And
that's way easier.
And what are you checking for? When
So we'll check them. We check the barrels. I would say we don't check every single barrel. We'll check every batch probably. A batch will fill about 10 barrels.
Okay.
And we'll check it after 2 to 3 months. We generally don't even bother in the first 2 to 3 months because it may taste pretty good, but it's definitely not going to be ready, at least on the big 53-gallon barrels.
Mm-hmm.
The larger the barrel, the more time it takes in aging. So some of the small barrels, those little 15-gallon barrels, they're done in 4 months, pretty much across the board. But the bigger barrels, we'll check them, every 2 to 3 months, I'd say.
Okay.
And we're looking for, does it have barrel character? We're looking for the vanillins from the wood. We're looking for, it should have a pretty potent aromatic from that spirit. So you want it to have a big vanilla bourbon aroma, or that kind of sweet vanilla, kind of sugary aroma from the rum barrels. And then the other oddball spirit barrels that we've gotten, we had some tequila barrels and you could just smell the agave even when you walked by the barrels. So we're looking for that to pick up in the beer itself.
I've had a few tequila barrel aged beers, and they definitely show up.
Yeah,
they're very unique. I wouldn't say they're my favorite.
It's definitely a hit or miss, and some of the stuff people put into tequila barrels, I'm not sure why. I guess it seemed like a good idea, or
they're available possibly, or
yeah. I mean, it's still a wood barrel, so you're still gonna get barrel. So a lot of the beers that I find are a little bit harder to enjoy that have been in tequila barrels, they don't. It's like, oh, this would play well with tequila, but you're putting it into a wood vessel, and you're just all the barrel is just. It ends up really muddled, and I really liked what we got out of those barrels. Every time we get a new spirit type barrel, we just put our imperial stout in it.
Are you still playing around with different kinds of barrels? Or?
Yep, we have the aquavit barrels are the most interesting thing we have. They're actually puncheons, they're called. They're much bigger and long. They're also called port pipes, but aquavit's an interesting spirit. That's definitely going to be a hit or miss because aquavit has it's not quite like absinthe, but it has that licorice, that black licorice.
Right? Yeah.
It has some of that. It's not like absinthe can be over the top. I have a hard time, and I don't mind licorice. I don't love it, but absinthe can be a little rough sometimes.
Sure.
But this, smelling what we got out of the barrel as we're filling it, because when you're filling it, all the vaporized spirit is rushing out, and that smelled tremendous. So I've got high hopes, but I know it's going to have some black licorice, and some people are just going to, no matter how good the beer is, I hate black licorice. Well,
so once you get the barrel, how many times can you use it?
We use our barrels once. We've tried multiple times, and I'd say our success rate was around 10%.
Okay.
And the beer is expensive to brew. It's a lot of risk, especially when you start doing a lot of volume. At the time, we were just doing one here and there, and some of them were little 15-gallon barrels, and we had a consistent infection. They all had the same infection, but this was over probably about 2 years.
This was after using the barrel 2 or 3 times?
Just the second time.
Oh, second time, wow.
And we had one that was great, and it was the second one we ever did a second use on, which is unfortunate because it gave us a lot of hope, and we tried a bunch more, and they were all terrible.
Okay, well,
but
lesson learned, I guess, right?
Some people
the
have
hard
had
way,
success.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Some people have had success. Some people will give you a bunch of methods for what you can do to the barrel to use it a second time, and honestly, for us, it's just not worth it.
What do you do with the barrels when you're done?
We sell them to some individuals. They want them for their houses. Some brewers, home brewers, want them, and they use them, and bless their hearts.
Have you had any product
I've
from
had
them?
one, and it was great. You did a great job.
Okay.
I have not had many others. I'm guessing because the beer got super infected, and we tell people pretty upfront, like, I would not put beer in this.
Nice.
Some moonshiners have gotten some barrels.
I've heard I've heard once it's gone through the bourbon and it comes to the breweries, they use it and it goes back to bourbon, that there's been some sort of right.
It can't be bourbon again, but it'll be, you can do whiskey
Right.
as a generic term. We are actually doing a project with Jameson because that's Irish whiskey, so they use ex-bourbon barrels, and they use them 3 times. So they don't care if it's been, there's no laws about that, so they do.
And I heard they torch it or something like that, or they get a big torch and just
No, they
burn
have a
everything.
gigantic hole in the head is how they empty their barrels, which is weird.
Oh, they don't torch. I heard. Okay.
No, they don't. I mean, they all barrels end up charred. That's before bourbon, before any spirit.
But I thought maybe they recharred it or something. Okay.
Nope. They do use some new wood barrels, which they definitely do char themselves. They have that place is amazing, but they have 2 coopers. Like they can take apart a barrel into a pile of sticks and put it back together inside of like 3 minutes.
Wow.
Then as soon as he took the last ring off and it just fell apart, having taken apart a barrel, it's like there's no way I could ever get this back together. It's like that's just heartbreaking.
Have you ever thought about hiring a barrel maker and
no?
making,
I mean,
you
kind of. It's across my mind, but I did learn some things watching a cooper work. We're actually barrel aging hunting right now. We have a bourbon barrel, a Woodford rye barrel that is full of meadow foam honey, and for whatever reason, the higher viscosity, higher sugar, so I'm guessing just lower water content, things you age in barrels, maple syrup and honey now, both, they tend to leak.
Oh, really?
Even though you'd think honey's so thick, if it held water.
Now, generally you're brewing stouts at a, over 10%. Is that about right? And you're putting them in these wooden barrels. Generally, oak is going to be
always oak.
Always oak. Okay.
There are other types of wood but I've not seen other types of wood that have held spirit and then be available for beer.
So once you transfer the beer into these barrels, you're doing a little bit longer process than I've heard of, and that's you're putting some of these beers in there for a year. Is that correct?
Yeah, it varies. There's plenty of breweries that'll age beer in oak, it's talking clean beer, so not sours. That'll do 2 years.
Wow.
They're doing that in generally climates that have seasons, and you see this in the liquor, like the bourbon business. The top floors of their rick houses are warmer, and the ones on the sunny side are warmer, and so those barrels age faster. Because when you heat it up, it forces the liquid farther into the wood.
Okay.
And then when it cools down, it draws back out of the wood, and you get the flavors.
I have seen that where they roll them to hotter and warmer to expand the wood and put it back in.
Exactly. And when you're doing a many years long process like bourbon, I really think the number of times it goes through that in and out of the wood process really matters. With beer, what we're looking to get out of it is really, for us personally, we just want the vanillins. We want that bourbon aroma that isn't hot, and you can get that just by basically getting as far into the wood as the bourbon went, and then you just drain that back out.
Right.
And so that we can do. So the warmer, the quicker. There's all kinds of debates about what's better. Maybe slower is better. All kinds of debates, and not just the beer industry, and the liquor industry as well. But down here, because we don't have a 8,000 square foot air conditioned warehouse, it's hot, and so it's pretty hot almost all of the year except maybe 2 months.
Right.
So our stuff ages pretty quick. A year for us is plenty long.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. We've gotten a ton of information about barrels, and any homebrewers out there, you want to pick up a barrel and do
ask around. There's methods apparently that you can use them again.
Right. I've seen some, but there's no definitive information online. No, the distilleries don't want to talk about it. They don't want to give out the information because they don't want people opening up a distillery, and they don't want competition. So it's very hard, I know, finding any kind of information out about barrels and aging and how to make them and all that stuff. Thanks a lot, Doug. Appreciate it.